Hello there. Today I thought I'd take a look at a high quality Lambrusco. You could be forgiven for thinking that that's a contradiction in terms. But what I have here is a Lambrusco di Sorbara DOC wine. And that's a DOC for red and rosé Lambrusco from just north of Modena in Emilia-Romagna. This wine's produced around the village of Sorbara in a region that lies between the Secchia and the Panaro rivers. The style of wines for this DOC can be sweet or dry, they can be spumante or frizzante, but they must be made at least 60% from a clone of Lambrusco called Lambrusco di Sorbara. And that is seen as the best quality clone there is for Lambrusco, and because Lambrusco is a little bit like Muscat. There's not just one Muscat grape variety, in the same way there's not just one grape variety that is Lambrusco. There are quite a number of clones with a number of different levels of quality and attributes. Now, one of the things about the DOC Lambrusco di Sorbara is that you can actually use up to 40% of another quality clone of Lambrusco in the wine. That's Lambrusco Salamino de Santa Croce, and in fact you can also use 15% of other clones as well, but there must be a minimum of 60% of the di Sorbara clone in these wines. However, on this occasion the wine we're looking at is the Radice from the Paltrinieri family, and this is the 2021 vintage of that. And the Paltrinieri family only make wines that are 100% made from Lambrusco di Sorbara. And the reason this clone is a high quality clone is that it has a tendency to drop its flowers. Now that might be seen as a slight annoyance, because actually it can drop up to 30% of its crop at flowering. But as a result, the remaining 70% will be much more concentrated, and it's supposed to have wonderful aromatics as well. So for that reason, this stands out as the top quality clone for producing Lambrusco. Lambrusco di Sorbara has to complete a second fermentation. That can be in tank or in bottle. Now, when I first saw the wine, I noticed that, and I think if I show you that quite closely there, you can see there's sediment at the bottom there, just in the corner of the bottle there. And I'm being very careful not to stir it up there. And I wondered if this was a Pétillant Naturel, a pet nat wine. In fact, that wouldn't be allowed, because what a pet nat is a pet nat is where a wine continues its first fermentation in the bottle, and that provides the fizz. Whereas this will complete a first fermentation and is then bottled and starts a second fermentation in the bottle. Actually, what this is méthode ancestrale. It's the leaving the dead yeast after the second fermentation actually in the bottle, and the Paltrinieri family believe that helps this wine age. So again, that's a quality factor with regard to this wine. Now, the brand name Radice means roots, and that relates to the fact that Alberto is in fact the fourth generation of his family to run this estate, and he, with his wife Barbara, took over the management of the estate back in 1998. The 17-hectare estate in Cristo di Sorbara, and the Paltrinieri family are regarded as one of the quality producers of Lambrusco di Sorbara, and in fact they make, not this one, but they do make a number of single vineyard wines in the region as well. They cultivate their vines in a couple of slightly unusual training systems. They use Geneva double curtain and Silvos training systems, and both of those are systems designed to allow the plant to grow downwards to set its fruit, and that's quite a good way of devigorating the plant. The soils here between the two rivers, the Secchia and the Panaro, is largely silty and sandy, and it has a high proportion of vegetation in it. As far as the winemaking is concerned, they collect the free rum juice and there's a soft pressing. There's no maceration of the crushed berries to take colour from the skins. Alcoholic fermentation takes place in tank, and then there's a second alcoholic fermentation, which the notes say is with natural yeast. I find that quite interesting, because I'd be intrigued to know as to how you could ensure you got the same amount of natural yeasts in each bottle to start a fermentation simultaneously. So actually what I assume that they mean is that they start a second fermentation in the tank, and once that is actually going, everything is then bottled. And bottling takes place in March, the year following harvest. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say is looking at the colour, it is a tiny touch cloudy. I've tried to not disturb the wine, but even in pouring it, there's a very slight haze in there. The bubbles in there are fine. They do seem to have slowed up, rising both in the bottle and the glass, but as I swirl it, they're showing themselves. They seem quite fine. There's a beautiful sort of pale orangey red colour there. I mean, I'm unsure as to whether that's an incredibly pale red or a very dark rosé. I think most people would probably say rosé, but actually the wine's labelled as a frizzante red wine if I looking at the back label here. Let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are delicately yeasty, but then at the same time behind that, there's some lovely lifted, soft fruit, strawberry sort of notes. I don't know whether it's a suggestive thing from the colour, but actually it's almost as if there's a tiny touch of orange note in there as well, perhaps orange peel. So let's have a taste. Now I said the style can be dry or sweet, and the style is certainly dry. It has really very fresh acidity, and I'm getting delightful red fruit. There's delicate soft strawberry notes. There's delicate notes that might be raspberry. There's an almost slight spicy note to it, but then there's almost a sort of a peachy richness as well. Ripe peach, that's the thing. The wine's quite light-bodied. The alcohol's 11%, so it's not really intruding on the wine particularly, which is allowing a lovely fresh fruit to coat the palate. And there's plenty of this delicate flavour right the way across the back of my tongue, giving fair length. And there's this lovely fresh crispness is allowing to express itself, and the fine bubbles were initially sort of sitting as a bead on the edges of my tongue and just sort of softening the entire experience. There's a nice endurance to the flavour. It's really quite sort of fresh, and again there's that sort of peachy tang on the edges of my tongue there. It's lively, fresh, and really quite enjoyable. It's held up quite well. I did wonder whether perhaps a 2021 vintage of this wine, given that we're now in 2024, might be starting to fade. Perhaps the fruit isn't quite as fresh as when it went into bottle, but I think actually the acidity is allowing that to hold up very well for a nice period of time. I'm not sure that this is a wine that I would expect to improve with any age, so I wouldn't consider cellaring it, but I think in the right situation, beautifully chilled, very refreshing, because it's really quite toothsome acidity. I mean, there really is a lovely bite to the acidity, although actually there is enough fruit in there that stops it being sort of tart and green, but you certainly know there's a good freshness there, and there's such a lovely length as well. So yes, I was intrigued. Our Wine Searcher average score on this, and the critics says aggregated score, this vintage is only an aggregation of 2 critics scores, but that's up to 94 points. I think that's one particular critic being quite enthusiastic there. Personally, I think that score has come out a little high. Having said that, I could see situations where, with the right foods, on a beautiful hot summer's day somewhere near Bologna, this would be absolutely gorgeous to drink. It has got that lovely length and that lovely freshness. And those are qualities that might be easy to overlook in some people's tasting. I personally think that 94 is actually probably a little bit generous in terms of the marks, but I like that somebody has enjoyed this wine so much that they backed it with such generosity of a score. And I think actually the wine does deserve a second look. Even if you're not entirely sure that it's worth 94 out of 100, it's a very enjoyable wine. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the tasting of interest. If you've enjoyed it, please press the like button. If you've got any comments, please leave those in the comments box below. We would love to get your feedback either about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. If you have any friends you think might be interested in watching the video, do please pass it on. Do please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. It will be fantastic to have your support there. That way you can set it up so you can be notified every time we release a new video and you won't miss one at all. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now.